Shut up and sit down.
Welcome back to another episode of the Bowhunter Chronicles podcast, brought to you by Tacticam. Tacticam is by far the easiest way to begin filming your hunts, whether it's with the budget-friendly Solo or the 4K Tacticam 5.0. Tacticam has something for all levels of self-filmers. They even give you the ability to capture the shot through your scope or your crossbow with their film through scope system. You can check that out at tacticam.com. This week's episode, we talk with Jason Redd of Timber Ninja Outdoors. Jason is a very interesting guy. He's a guy that when you sit down and speak with him, it's like you'd known him forever. I mean, he's the epitome of a like-minded individual. And so Timber Ninja Outdoors was the first guys to bring the carbon fiber sticks, super light, ultra light climbing sticks to market. And they were working on some other products. But Jason also has a background in safety equipment. So we talk a lot on this podcast about safety, kind of doing your homework on different brands and products as you're buying from some of these upstart companies like Timber Ninja Outdoors and a lot of the other tree stand, saddle platform manufacturers that are out there. So this is a real fun episode. I think you guys are going to like it. I just got to give a quick shout out to our latest Patreon from Indiana, Ken Ruppel. So Ken is now entered into the giveaway. We're actually giving away a set of the bee sticks. I had that set up and ordered before we had this podcast with Jason. So don't let that sway your opinion of these Jason's products in the climbing sticks. But we are going to be giving away a set of the bee sticks with some other prizes to one of our lucky Patreons. At the end of the quarter, so right before most of the seasons are starting. We're going to be giving away that. We're giving away a Tacticam Solo package, as we mentioned in the intro. We'll be giving away a Basemap Pro membership. So Basemap has all the features of any of the other mapping services. Basemap allows you to download as large of an area as your phone will handle. And it has a myriad of different maps, different layers, different things. And the price point, it's $30 for the entire country for the year. And you can get 20% off of that, so it ends up being $24 if you go online and you use the code Chronicles. So we're giving away one of those. And then I just was digging around in my stuff, and I've got another monthly giveaway package. So I'll be giving that out here in the next week or so. I'll go live and do that, as well as one of our giveaways for a free month of the All Access Vitals Live, which is learning platform that's interactive. We'll get to have some conversations with guys like Dan Infall, Johnny Eberhart, Troy Fowler, Greg Litzinger, Garrett Prawl. Throughout the month, they do learning sessions, and we'll give away one of those all access passes to one of our patrons. And if you want to check that out, you can go to patreon.com/Bowhunter Chronicles podcast. That is just like a crowdfunding for podcasts, creators, and the like. So it helps us with operating costs, equipment costs, all the things that are associated with running this podcast. But if that's not for you, no big deal. Please just tell someone about our podcast. We really appreciate everybody, sharing the things that we're doing well, and then leave us a review so we know how we're doing and things that we can improve on. And if you really like it, click that 5-star button and subscribe to our YouTube. But all in all, we just appreciate every single one of the listeners, everybody that keeps tuning in week after week, month after month. And, for the years that we've been doing this, we've developed some real great friendships with the listeners. So we do appreciate every single one of you. And I do believe you're going to really like this podcast. Enjoy. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Bowhunter Chronicles podcast. Adam and John on the phone tonight with Jason Red, Timber Ninja Outdoors. So I don't know if you've maybe seen these or whatever. This is another one of the, a product that's come out, and it's kind of one of the ones I think that raises some eyebrows, and it's kind of like keeps pushing to that thing. And I'm going to do my best to be as hard on Jason as I can, because the question that always comes up is how light is too light, or how much does it matter, or whatever along those lines, as far as like ounces versus pounds versus how far are you going, how far are you actually really going when you say you're going 2 miles in or whatever. And so Jason's got he's the one that's come out with the carbon fiber sticks, and I know that there's a lot of questions circulating all the forums and things like that about how can it possibly be safe, how do you know what happens if it's too cold or this or that, but we'll get into that here on the podcast. So how are you doing tonight, Jason?
Man, I'm doing pretty good. Today's actually my birthday. I turned 40 today, so it's like this sounds a little morbid, but I've always considered 40 being like the apex. It's like the tipping point in my life. I always said if I made it past 80, that was like a mile marker for me. So, but yeah, it's been a good day, man. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, well, happy birthday. My birthday was on Friday, and interestingly enough, isn't today your good buddy Adrian's birthday?
It is, man. And I just found that out through your podcast. So when I was listening to it the other day, I immediately texted him. I was like, dude, I completely understand why we have this like manly romantic relationship with one another. It's because we share the same birthday.
Well, I wasn't gonna bring that up, but he told me lots of interesting facts about you that I didn't know if they were true or not, and he was not pulling any punches. So, it sounds like you two have a pretty interesting relationship.
Oh yeah, he's a good dude, man. He told me about that. We joke a lot, man. He's a great guy. That was a good podcast you did with him too. It's good. Like, he's one of the most humble people, man, and just as genuine as they come. Just a great guy.
Well, awesome. So let's get a little bit of background on you, because I listened to a couple of the other podcasts that you were on anyways, and it sounds like you talk about like a humble individual or whatever. It sounds like you're like a extremely interesting individual. Like, it's like, man, if you want to do something cool, like, Jason's the guy. He's done it. That's what he does. So what's your background and your hunting style, and how did you come up hunting and kind of get where you are today?
Well, I was born in Arkansas, and I started hunting there when I was my grandfather was taking me with him, I don't know, when I was probably 3 or 4, like going out and sitting in duck blinds and stuff. Then I started hunting on my own at 7. And, I was born in 1980. And when we grew up, when I was 7, I got turned loose in a deer stand by myself. It's not, like, the safety factor wasn't, you just kind of had to do it back then. And so, I grew up there and hunted a lot of public land down there. And I've said this a few times, but we hunted public land just because we didn't have any money. We couldn't afford to be in leases or anything like that. And I just really enjoyed that. And everything was an adventure, like leaving the house to go to deer camp in public land, sleeping in tents was just always cool. And it always resonated with me, and kind of, expanded through my adolescent years and to my 20s. I was traveling, doing some hunting. I got into endurance sports, raced bicycles, traveled around the country doing that. I adventure for surfing, rock climbing, still do. Also the hunting. So like, yeah, man, I just like getting out and doing things. So it's really fun. We, like people say all the time, we only live once, right? So anytime I can, I have a very supportive spouse, and so I get to, you know, get out on some ventures every year, and that's just what I really like to do.
And so, like, I think one thing that's key here, in that and what you've done with the, bringing these sticks to market is, what is your background for your job? Like, and do you have any history in like engineering or manufacturing or anything, or how did you get into like probably, I said it before when we talked about broadheads, like that's kind of like the worst market to get into because everybody loves them or hates them, but the climbing system market seems to be just the same because everybody's is the best and it doesn't need to be that light if it's not the lightest, and if it is the lightest, then why does it got to be so heavy? Mine are better, you can carry them. There's just so much infighting over those couple categories. So like, what's your background, and then why'd you choose the worst or second worst category to get into?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, it seems like the mobile hunting, what I call at height products, seem to have the most competition and a little bickering, I guess. So my background is I've been in safety for 16 years. I worked for a manufacturer of hand protection for a long time. I did a lot of uh, end user consultations for designing and developing hand protection. Left there and went to work for a customer. Got into all aspects of safety. I'm a certified fall protection specialist. I consult, inspect, then help people with their issues in plants. And I own a company that we're a sales rep firm for manufacturers of safety and industrial equipment. So we sell to people like Granger. And so most of my career has been in safety. And then, with my rock climbing background, I, obviously have a lot of, interest and experience dealing with things at heights, ropes, knots, climbing systems, so it all comes together there. But through my day job, I have a lot of connections through manufacturers that make all the parts that we use in our products. So that's kind of how it was. I'm not going to say easy for me to do this, but it definitely gave me a leg up. It's some of these plants, it's really hard to get into, man. Like, there's so many people that call them to talk about stuff, but unless you're real serious or you have some type of connection, they don't want to work with you to develop a product, because to do research and development on a product for them is, $500 to $1,000. And it's really not worth their time unless they really feel that, you're serious about bringing something to market. So already having a relationship with some of these people really helped us, get off the ground with the products.
So why carbon fiber?
Well, for me, I've been mobile hunting pretty much my whole life, just because of how I mainly hunted public that time, and in coming up through cycling and other sports where I use carbon fiber, there's materials that were getting used that weren't getting used in the mobile hunting area. So it just a few years back, it just really just dawned on me. It's like nobody's really doing anything but the same thing. I mean, essentially, a lot of stuff is just like some little modification to an already existing material. They make people have definitely made products stack better. They made them lighter, mainly by shortening them and things like that, because at the end of the day, metal's metal. It's going to weigh the same regardless, right? So the only way to really change a product is, from a weight perspective and even a sound barrier perspective, was to change the material. And when I was wanting to make a better product for myself, I was like, well, nobody's done anything with carbon fiber, so I'm gonna start playing with that. I know it works. I mean, they use it in so many other, we use, things that I use for outdoor, ice axes. backpack frames, bicycles, hiking sticks. There's a carbon fiber element to all of those. So why hasn't anybody done it with like a climbing stick? And so I started playing with that because I knew it would be lighter, it would be quieter, and also it wouldn't have it doesn't hold cold or heat. So, I think we've all, if you hunt in cold areas, your hands are cold walking to the stand, you go and grab your sticks, like you feel that instantly, it makes it, your hands don't want to operate the same. So there's a lot of benefits to it for sure. So, but it's not as easy as from a DIY perspective as it is with aluminum. You can't just slap some holes in it and throw some steps on it and call her good. That fails, or it can fail, and I definitely learned that in the beginning. So
Yeah, I mean, so actually, John has regressed now, but we were both shooting carbon fiber riser bows, and that's the one biggest thing is in the cold when you grab that riser, and so that's going to be a shock to you. I'm looking at your bow now, saying,
well, that's why I haven't got rid of my carbon bow. But that is one of the biggest. I was telling Adam when we were talking about doing this podcast, I'm like, that's one of my biggest pet peeves is when I get down, especially at the end of the hunt, and you're wrapping up your sticks to put them away, and you can't stack them and stuff without taking your gloves off, or I can't anyway. It's like, and so your hands are already cold from sitting all evening or morning, and then you go and got to take your gloves off and handle these aluminum sticks, and it's like 0 degrees out. By the time you're done, you can't even move your hands. That's a huge pain in the ass.
Yeah, it is, man. And and besides just the carbon fiber element of it being a lighter product, one thing that really bugged me was there wasn't anybody at that time making products that really stacked very well. And like even ours today, like you have to put a little bit of a lashing, either a rope or, Austin at 3D or Genesis 3D made some clips that go with our products that hold it together. But once they're semi even secure, they don't crumble. I use an analogy. A lot of the products, I'm not picking on Lone Wolf, but that's just the product I used Lone Wolf and I used Muddies mostly. And, you had to stagger step them in the dark. And when you think you'd have them right, they would crumble over, and that would tick me off so bad. I mean, you guys have probably been there. I mean, people are getting a little bit better with their stacking methods for sticks, but that was a big thing for me. And also just when you go to stack them or unstack them, the metal cling, man, that's a very unnatural noise. I mean, how many people are buying sticks today, and even premium sticks? And I'm not trying to pick on anybody, but then you have to turn around and go and put stealth strips on them, and that takes time and money. And people have asked me this question a lot about our product, and I'm like, well, what's your time worth? Because I mean, I know what my time is valued at an hourly rate, and it's a lot more than another $20 to buy something that I don't have to stealth strip.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. Now, yeah, I had the Muddy Pros at the beginning of last year, and that was exactly what you said. You'd have them all stacked, and you'd think that they were clipped in, and you'd go to tighten them up, and they just fall apart, and it's like, come on.
Yeah.
So I definitely feel you on that one. Do you think it's I mean, obviously, we do bow hunting podcast, so that's kind of where we're at. But there's carbon fiber risers. Everybody shoots carbon arrows. I believe, like in the high end rifle world, there's carbon fiber barrels. Why are people not using? Why do you think we haven't seen a shift in that? Is it cost prohibitive or manufacturing? I mean,
I think it's a little bit of both. It's not easy to get into and figure it out. Like I've spent multiple thousands of dollars going through prototypes to get ones that work for the long run. Because as I've mentioned many times and share, our products have went through the ASTM testing and passed that and passed the repetitive motion testing. So we wanted something that was really durable, and it comes with a price point because, anybody can get on online metals and see what 1-inch aluminum tube costs. And you can even go to some of the manufacturers that make carbon fiber tube, and you can instantly tell there's a really high cost of doing business to jump into the carbon fiber world. It's expensive, and you definitely have to either know people that work with carbon fiber, which I have connections that do, and that's what really helped us get through some of the struggles we had in the beginning. But it's not cheap. Either you got to pay for their time or you have to have a connection there. I do know with the manufacturer we're working with on our stands that there have been people reach out to them about making a stand prototype before, and when the cost came up, that's where the conversation ended. So it's an expensive endeavor to get started with, but I felt like it was something worthwhile. I didn't do this to try to make a quick buck. It's something I was really invested in as a project and fun, and really we wanted to have a cool platform to bring out innovative products that also is essentially a catapult for giving back to conservation, because that's something that we're big on conservation and hunter recruitment. So if we can create cool products that get attention, and then we make some money and we can give money back to support these things, everybody wins at the end.
Yeah, you mentioned Austin with Genesis 3D. He's right here in our same town or in our county. I met him and picked up some of the tenders in person from him last year or so, and I've been trying to connect with him here and there. But the sticks that you have a why I mentioned that is the sticks that you have are using a polymer for the steps. With this rise in 3D printing and everybody making everything, do you see and your background in safety, do you see there being like people coming out with 3D printed steps or things like that? I mean, I know he does a real good job with his bow hanger saying this is not a step, this is not a step. How with the polymer step, how are you making sure that that's with your background, I'm sure that it's that, but the safety portion of that being polymer on like the actual part that seems to have the amount of force on it.
Yeah. So we worked with a plastics engineer to come up with the best polymer that would withstand the stress load, the different temperature variances and everything and we found that. I mean, the testing proves it. Now it does have a little flex like our polymer. Our step does have a little bit of flex at times. Some people notice it, some people don't. But that's what it's supposed to do. It's kind of like buildings and bridges. If you've ever stopped on a major bridge crossing, let's say the Mississippi River, you feel the bridge jumping, and that's just because it has to give, and that's how like our polymer step reacts. It has, it give a little bit, but it's not bad. Like, there was a guy that posted a video of him like torquing on it back and forth, and it was moving, but it didn't break. And we shared test results to prove that, hey, this thing is went under 300 pounds of load 4,000 times and didn't break. But so with our product, we buy sheet material and it's machined. It's not 3D printed, and it's not injection molded either. And I could do it cheaper through injection molding, but the problem is there potentially could be consistency, and I didn't want to go that route. I'd much rather just do something that we knew was tried and true and it works. And the material that we use is used in a lot of applications in place of aluminum and parts and things like that. So it by itself also works, just like aluminum products and performs.
Okay. I just think it's important to bring up, because every time something new comes out, there's the DIY copycat guy that says, I can do that. And like, oh, it's just a polymer. I can 3D print one of those. And the difference,
Yeah.
I think there needs to be a distinction.
Yeah, 3D printed step. Yeah, you guys can use it.
Yeah. Well, man, I have a buddy that's in prosthetics. He makes carbon fiber prosthetics. He owns his own company, and he has a 3D printer. 3D printers are awesome, and they work. But like, if you look at what Austin's doing right now, and he's getting pretty big, like you got to keep adding a lot of printers because it's not a real fast process, and it's not a very cheap process. It makes cool stuff, and 3D printing is pretty consistent. But man, the cost of entry there, because essentially where we're at today, from my understanding of talking to people and my buddy that's in prosthetics, is the 3D printers are really good for making prototypes, but they're just not. It's not quite there yet for production. You just have to keep adding these printers, which are not cheap. But with the milling, we set the machine up, and it just runs stock through there and just cuts it like it would aluminum. And actually the tool life is longer when you're cutting, the polymer than it is aluminum too. So, but it still isn't cheap. We're doing this all in the United States, so we're paying American wages and to keep this dream alive.
Right. Now, we've been talking about the sticks, and you've got a couple other products and things like that coming out. But one thing I wanted to talk to you about, just because of your background in rock climbing, and I know one of the products you have is like the little mini one stick for the one stick guys. Like, what is your preferred climbing method? What do you bring? Because I know I've heard you talk on the other podcasts about doing the rope climbing and the with the rock climbing background, that seems to be like right in your wheelhouse. And like when I look at it, it looks like a hell no. There's no way I'm gonna do that much farting around up and down, and be sweating, and if you drop something, like what a mess. Like it just seems so terrible. So I thought it'd be a good topic to touch on with you.
Yeah, man. Honestly, I really do like, my buddy and I, that's a climber, started doing this years ago. We call it the RAD system, rapid ascent and descent. And essentially we just take an arborist bag, throw it over a limb, pull a climbing rope up, and then we use, a hand ascender, climbing harness, and, an aider, which I just use a Dyneema climbing sling, and a Grigri device. And we essentially ascend the rope. And that's the same thing we do on rock climbing walls sometimes. Like if you're on like a big wall, a big multi-pitch route, like a lot of people are familiar with Alex Honnold and people that, and Tommy Caldwell that climb the Don Wall. They work these sections of the route multiple times before they actually, completed a climb in one go. And a lot of times how you do that is you rappel down on a fixed line and then get your gear up. You're having to jug these lines on the cinder. So it's pretty efficient for us, that people that have done it a lot, but it's not, there's a little bit of labor involved with that. And, but in my opinion, it's the safest manner if you're running on a fixed line that's attached to a tree limb. Obviously, if the tree limb breaks, you're, SOL, but you're always tied into something with a protective device. And then after the hunt, you can just, swing out and wrap down off your, on that line. But the problem with that is, especially, for me, I go into a lot of places I've never even been before. So I don't even know what trees are going to be there, what types of trees. You can get a decent idea from aerial topo, topo maps and stuff, but you don't know for sure. And you don't know the age of the growth sometimes. So you don't know if they have limbs down low. So it's, you're sitting there trying to find a limb. So my given method is I use sticks, and I prefer the 20-inch stick. And that was essentially, that's our flagship product for this, our C1 carbon fiber sticks is the 20-inch. And the reason I, like that is because I carry a frame pack. In my frame pack and torso, I'm 6'2". My frame pack is 24 inches, and that 20-inch fits in that profile very well. So that was a big problem I was having with some of the longer sticks when I was using like the longer, the 3-step lone wolves, is it was sticking above my head and getting caught in brush and things like that when I'm going through the woods, and just a pain in the ass. So we do the 20-inch fits perfect, never really gets hung up in anything, especially if you have a pack that has a brain or a lid. Some people call it a lid. You can cover your top step up, and it just slips right over your pack when you get into some thick brush. And I'm not a big advocate for hunting high. I don't hunt very high. Usually 10 to 12 feet is probably where I end up the most, if I would say. I put more attention into how I'm setting up, what my cover looks like, and making sure I'm in the shadows and things like that.
Yeah, John's got the same frame, same size, same problems.
Yeah.
But interesting to say that you don't hunt high, because it seems like if you wanted to sell a whole bunch of sticks, you'd be like, I got to have 5 of them. I'm getting way up there,
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you tried the one stick? Because that seems to be like in this game of,
minimal.
Well, internet badasses, like, well, they're trying to get as light as possible and as high as possible, and that always comes up. Like, this is how much my system weighs, and it doesn't matter how light it is.
Mm-hmm.
There's always some guy that says, well, if you just had one stick, it'd be that much lighter,
Yeah. I mean, we came out with the micro stick, and really I kept getting a lot of requests for it, is the only reason we brought that out. It's not a method that I use, but I have tried it. It is a lot of work, I mean, maybe somebody can do it a lot more efficiently than I can, but, essentially to get your stick, you got to essentially come back down a little bit to pull your stick back up to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of work in that. I mean, that's why I still say, in my opinion, the most efficient way of getting up a tree is with 3 or 4 sticks. And I mean, people use 8ers, so they're able to cut down on some. And I'd love to tell you to buy a stack of 30 sticks, so we sell more sticks. But that's just not the person I am. I'm gonna be quite frank with you and tell you in my opinion, what's the most efficient. I use mostly 4 sticks and an 8er on the bottom one sometimes, but I usually don't even need that.
Well, there's just so much, I don't know, bad information out there. I don't know if it's bad information, but everybody is an expert, and that's one of the things that we've had to, completely go the other way and say that, we are just regular guys. We don't know anything. I'm the world's worst bow hunter, and John's a garage bow tech, and don't do what we do. This is just how we do it. Because there's so many people, whether they've got a podcast, a YouTube channel, or whatever, saying this is the way or showing bad things. And I'm sure that you've seen that. How do you react to some of these things that are just so blatantly unsafe from your safety background, when you're seeing them and people saying that this is the way?
Yeah, it's tough, man. I mean, I've seen it for years in other sports. A lot of guys, you see it thrown out there a lot. I mean, and we get criticism because, obviously we have one of the most expensive sticks on the market right now. It's like, well, I can get it done with, a set of 4 Hawk Heliums at $100, and it's like, yeah, I can do a lot of things. Like, I can kill a deer with a $200 Sage recurve, but I want to know that I have a good quality longbow that I pay $1,000 for, and just that way there's nothing can go wrong. And we see these issues happen all the time with people's products, but it really, in cycling, we saw this all the time. Guys always talking about having the lightest bike. And well, there's a point of diminishing returns. Like, if you have the lightest bike, but you're overweight, like, you're not really faster, or if you're fitness, you're not putting the time in to be good at riding a bicycle and fast. Like, it doesn't matter what your bike weighs. Like, you need to work on your fitness. I mean, the same thing with hunting. Like, I don't have a problem packing 60 pounds in for multiple days, 5, 10, 20 miles a day. It's no big deal to me. But, I do like stuff to be lighter, and because it is more efficient, it's easier to carry up the tree and things like that. So, and from a safety perspective, there's a lot of people jumping into the market and making recommendations that I don't, I'm not going to say I necessarily agree with, but, if they've done their testing, and can share that information to qualify that their product's safe, it's all good. But, people just like to, we're all guys and there's egos involved, and some people just want to have an opinion, and we're all entitled to that. I'll never tell anybody that our product's the best. Like it's not the best for everybody, because sales philosophy 101 is people buy from people they like and who are like them. So there's going to be people that gravitate to companies regardless if they like their product, just because they like who runs the company and what they stand for. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah. I mean,
absolutely.
That's kind of like podcasting 101. Like when I set this up, I knew people were going to have to take time to get to know our personalities, so that they would have to, be able to resonate with our thoughts and our thought process, and to be, there wasn't anything out there at that time that resonated with me or John. So we said, well, let's do this. But the main thing that I tried to do was the best audio experience, because it doesn't matter how identifiable we are. It doesn't matter how, good or bad our information is. If you can't listen to it, then nobody's going to listen. So, that was one of the things. And so we knew that we were regular guys, and if we as regular guys could do this, we would get more regular guys to listen.
As long as it was, as long as they could hear us.
Yeah, John still struggles with the hearing us part.
Right. Well, and from a product, a manufacturer perspective, the internet's amazing, and e-commerce is amazing for allowing small businesses these days to be able to get your products out through the internet to, millions of people. Essentially in the next few years, there's going to be more people that have access to the internet than they do have, electricity and clean drinking water, right? So, you look at companies that start lifestyle brand t-shirts. If you look back in the day and you started a store in a town, like, there's a small chance of you actually becoming successful. But you can have a crappy company of a lifestyle brand of shirt, but when your market's so much bigger, you're going to be able to generate a lot of sales. But from what we do, so that allows us to do that with mobile hunting products too. But there's no like barrier to get into the industry as far as, safety requirements, insurance, and things like that. Because in the past, when the people that were making hunting products, for instance, they had their main channel of being able to be successful was going through big box stores, right? And big box stores, they're not going to sell anything unless you have all your ducks in a row from a product liability perspective, insurance, all these things. So those people and the ones that were doing it back then, I feel are really still doing it. But sometimes you have to question if some of these other companies that are coming into the market are doing their due diligence and having all these things done, because there's nothing to say that, you and I could go today and start making a product, and, two of us get on together with a combined weight of 300 pounds. It doesn't break. We'll call her good, and there's a reason that, some of the standards that essentially like the big box stores wouldn't accept any manufacturer's product that wasn't TMA certified, and TMA worked with ASTM to develop standards for testing on hunting products, right? Same way fall protection, ASTM set standards for fall protection. Climbing companies do that, and so there was that was like the minimal point of entry to get your products out there, unless you were selling out of the fab shop to local people, So yeah, it's quite concerning, because anybody can do anything and hope it's good, and like just putting 300 pounds on something and it doesn't break the first time doesn't mean that like it's not going to break in 3 years. I mean, we all see pictures of products and well-known products, and things do happen. Don't get me wrong. Like there's quality issues that can come up with material or whatever, but we all see bent standoffs. We see hardware breaking, all that type of stuff. And you have to wonder, well, some products, did they go through some of this strenuous testing? Like the repetitive motion test, in my opinion, is the best thing that ASTM does when they're testing hunting products to determine the durability of your product. So for instance, for the repetitive motion for a climbing stick, if you have 2 steps on the stick, it has to pass 1,000 repetitive motions of 300 pounds. Essentially it equates to a certain amount of days, times a certain number of years is how they come up with that, because it's all durability.
And so when you were talking about climbing up with your rad system, or like a single rope, double rope system for, I think that's what's most commonly seen. Do you said that's like the safest way because you're always tied in, and that automatically brings us to like saddle hunting. When you were doing that, I mean, I know you've got a tree stand, and I don't know if you were working on a saddle platform or anything along that, so we can talk about that. But I mean, have you hunted from your rock harness? Have you saddle hunted? What's your style in that regard? Because that seems to be safe.
Yeah,
from that side.
Well, I may do some things sometimes that aren't very safe. I don't really always use a lineman's belt when I climb, but I'm pretty confident climbing and where I'm at, like, and aware, like, of how many points of contacts I have and how close I keep my body to. I mean, it's just how you climb up a granite wall. You got to keep your body close, and even if my stick blows out, it's gonna, like say it kicks out or something like that, it's gonna go down, and more than likely I'm not going to go very far, because I don't put a lot of weight leaning back. But with like a saddle, I've hunted out of saddle some. I'm going to do a little bit more this year just because for the early season, tied on some beds. I feel it's a really good, quiet method, an easy method to get in without having to move a lot. But for me, in my experience from hanging around and climbing harnesses and other systems, it's tough for me to hang like that all day. I like a lock-on stand, where I can stand up and move around, which, I guess you technically kind of can do that with some saddles and platform setups, but most people are trying to go as light as they can. So their platforms are really small. So there's not much movement there. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. But from a safety perspective, the reason I say like a rope system, or even if you're using like a saddle with combination of a lineman's belt, then going directly into tether, you're always hooked in. And we call that, in the fall protection world, we call that, it's 100% tie off. That's why you see like, in construction environments, they'll have what they call dual leg lanyards that attach to their fall protection harness. Because if you're moving long distance and you come to an area where if you have 2 legs, you can always have one connected if you have to unconnect another one to, say, go around an I-beam or something like that. That is the beauty of like a fixed line rope system, is you're always in that rope system. So no matter what happens, you're not going to, if you do fall, you're always going to get caught. Same thing is if a guy's using a saddle and he's using his lineman's belt as he's going up the tree, and he doesn't disconnect his lineman's belt until he gets his tether connected and locked in safe on his saddle, that's pretty much 100% system there too. So there's very few areas where serious injury could happen, because there's also not much rope in the system of a saddle to where you're even going to take much of a fall, because you're always pretty taut, you know what I mean? There's not any slack in your rope or anything, so you're really not going to fall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was like kind of a leading question into, I guess from your safety background and everything, what are your thoughts on like kind of what's going on with the ASTM and the TMA standards for saddles, because they're still being held to the tree stand thing, and they're working on their own set of standards right now. We did a podcast with Ernie Power and kind of outlined how they're going through that. But with you and your rock climbing background and safety background, and having hunted from a saddle, I mean, even saying that a saddle is up to the TMA standards, I guess it has to be sufficient because there's no other standard. But I mean, what could they be doing differently, or what tests, would they need to change from your perspective?
So I've had that conversation with a couple of guys. So from a fall protection perspective, in general industry, you have fall. If you're in a at height environment, you either can be in restraint or you can be in fall protection. And restraint means you're restrained where there's no chance of you having a fall, right? And fall protection is where, you need some freedom of movement, multiple feet or whatever. So in the event of a fall, there has to be shock load to absorb the amount of shock. So essentially, most people are familiar, if you're familiar with climbing fall protection harnesses and lanyards, the general entry standard is a 6-foot lanyard with a fall protection harness. So when you fall and you're attached, most of the time you're going to fall when everything breaks in. There's going to be about 1,800 pounds of load go to your body because you're taking a 6-foot fall, and you have all this elongation and stuff, where your system kind of has blowout methods to kind of absorb some of that shock. So that's fall protection. And then you have fall restraint, where you have a harness where you're tied in on a fixed line, where you're not going to have that much rope or play in the system, that 6 foot we talked about, for the body to have to absorb all that, because you couldn't. It's going to be very painful to take 1,800 pounds of force to your body, especially if you don't know how to properly put on a harness, or climbing harness or safety harness, any of them. So what the problem they're having right now, from my understanding, is they're trying to hold a saddle to a fall protection standard, whereas in my opinion, it should be more held accountable to a restraint system, because there's not many chances. And I think I've heard Greg talk about this before in maybe a forum or something. And it's true. It's like, there's not much chance for you to put enough rope in the system to where you're going to have to absorb that much load, but I do feel that they're working. My understanding is there's a panel of saddle manufacturers that are proactive in working with TMA and ASTM to come up with a better set of standards to that. But, as it stands right now, all they have to hold people accountable is is the standard fall harness type scenario, which in my opinion, the two don't relate very well. But that doesn't mean, as a manufacturer, you shouldn't be doing some due diligence to at least having your products tested for a workable static safety load, which is, depending on what your weight rating, 300 pounds or whatever, which I know, I know because I know Tethered does that, and just because I know some people over there, and they use the same facility that I use for testing. So I do know they go there.
Yeah. And I mean, I know that there's other companies like that are on that panel, but I also know that there's other companies out there that have just blatantly said, well, the standard doesn't apply to us, and there isn't a standard for saddles, so we're not going to be part of this until there is a standard. And, I mean, that's from what Ernie said, is that ASTM is just a checker of a standard. They said, we can hold you accountable to the standard, but you have to come up with it. You know your product better than us. And so, there is no standard to be held to. They have to come up with that, and it has to meet all of the criteria for ASTM.
Well, I mean, because that's a slippery slope, because there's not a standard, but, if you're not having some type of testing done on your product, I mean, from my perspective, if I'm sitting in my shoes like I am, and I look at my products, all this is voluntary. Nothing is required. I don't have to have my stuff tested. Nobody does, because there's nothing going to keep you, and that's what we were talking about earlier. Nothing's going to keep you from going to sell your product if it's not tested or not. But first off, I would be able to sleep at night not knowing that my product had been tested outside of what I've done. I mean, there's a reason some of these standards are put in place, and you can use them from other industries to make sure your product is safe. It's like, the same argument comes up. I think, I'm not in the platform business at this point, but I hear people saying, well, there's no platform standard. Well, no, there's not, but you can take your product to a third-party testing lab and have it tested to a 2-time safety factor of 300 to guarantee and show people if they ask, hey, here's my report. It shows that my platform can hold this weight, whereas just because you've been welding for 40 years doesn't mean that, you're an engineer, I mean, I'd much rather people take somebody else's word for it. I mean, there's a reason that companies have to have audits on their accounting, right? And there's a reason OSHA exists. It's because you can't always depend on people to make the right decisions.
And then I guess back to that fall restraint thing, I was just thinking about, I think it's Alabama, but they require a fall restraint device. And there was some talk about that you have to wear a safety harness and a saddle because it's not rated as a fall, it's not a safety harness, but their hunter safety, their rules for the state, and it may not be Alabama, it's one of the southern states down there, requires that. So I just thought that was interesting from that perspective.
That's kind of I would say that maybe a recommendation. I don't know if, I don't know enough about that. Like if game wardens are going around and checking your safety equipment, because at the end of the day, we still can climb up in a tree like a monkey and sit on a limb, but I do feel there's room for improvement, like for it to be more of a standard entry of business to have some type of testing done. That's just how it works with any other type of product where you're putting somebody's health and life at risk,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, with some of the things I do at work, it's like there has to be like quadruple checks, because I mean we could kill somebody every day, and it's like, again, that whole not sleeping at night thing. I couldn't imagine, putting out products, sending them to people, and saying, yeah, well,
it should be good enough.
Or we I hooked it up to my truck and we pulled on it. Like, I don't know how many pounds it was or anything, but we pulled it with the 4x4, so it's got to be good.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was saying earlier that you can't just drill holes in the carbon and call it good. Like, I do have a set of sticks that I just drilled holes in originally and put some steps on there, and they torqued and stuff, but they never completely failed. But there were some times, before we worked and figured out to really make them bomb proof. Like they didn't. I had these set of sticks. I have holes drilled on them. I sent them to a picture of them to the guy the other day, and because somebody was saying that carbon fiber splinters and it completely decompromises it, and it will just collapse on you essentially like a trap door. And I sent a guy this picture. I was like, hey, here's a set that I hunted, and yeah, they creaked and split, and they also have 15 holes where I kept changing hole patterns and moving the sticks around, So things can somewhat work and not completely fail on you. Same thing with aluminum, and even when you see a standoff break because of cheap hardware or something, like usually it just bends all the way around, um, before it doesn't just completely collapse from up under you.
Right. Now, let's get into that a little bit real quick about the durability. And I think what you said there, I mean, one of the things you're concerned about all of this stuff, at height, and if you did have some sort of compromise, where does the safety concern? And I would imagine that misnomer, that conversation that you just had, could have possibly stemmed from what we see or what we tend to think of with carbon fiber and arrows, because it's like they tell you every single time, check your arrow, blah blah blah, but I mean, I feel like that's going however many hundreds of miles an hour right past your fingers. Like, it's not.
Yeah.
And so that's what you see, the splintering and all that, and everybody's broken carbon arrows, some of us more than others, and so maybe that's where that's coming from. So what is that durability? And I've heard you talk about it before, about like not just throwing them out of the tree stand as you descend or whatever, but they're going to get banged around on rocks and on other things. So as far as the durability,
they're extremely solid. I mean, I tell people, anything you buy that's a premium price, I just don't throw stuff around. You know what I mean? Like, and I've said this before, if you drop an aluminum stick, or I race bicycles, and I've raced bicycles when they were aluminum until they changed to carbon fiber. If you dented a bicycle, mountain bike, for instance, it compromises that aluminum at that area where it was bent. It can bend, fold right there. I mean, I've seen it happen on forks on bikes. I've seen complete frames completely crack. The same thing could happen if you damage carbon fiber. Like, you could have a weakness there. It won't completely just trap door and blow up on you. But the same thing can happen to aluminum. And what I tell people, and I'm actually about to release a video on this, not just for our products, because I don't see much of this out there, is thorough inspection of all of your equipment, like how to properly inspect ropes, how to properly inspect your harnesses, whether it be a saddle or a climbing harness, how to go through your sticks. Like, how many times have you heard people talk about, having a good premium product that uses quarter inch hardware that may not be grade 8, and it starts to bend, or it's always coming loose? So you need to check these things before you go into the woods. Same thing when we rock climb, and what I train in fall protection is, before you go and use your products that are protecting you, you should always inspect them. You need to make sure there's no wear, there's no nick or anything like that. I've heard Greg Godfrey talk about that, about people saying, when they first brought out saddles, hey, what if I'm swinging my broadhead across my tether? Is it going to completely cut it and I fall? It will nick, but it's not going to completely explode and fall to your death. I think he did he had a saw on it for a while. I think he put himself up like 6 inches off the ground or something, but he just wanted to test that theory himself. We see that same thing with, in rock climbing, with a sharp edge, and like, say you're rappelling off a root and your ropes work on that edge, there's protection in those ropes to keep them from completely blowing up. It takes a while. You have a sheath before you get to your core of the rope. So ultimately, to put this in perspective, is you should be looking at your products all the time to make sure there's no type of flaws happening. Things can happen. There's things that could happen to any type of product that you're just unaware of. A bolt couldn't get tightened the proper way from the manufacturer. You should inspect this stuff. And, a lot of people's products that are coming in right now too, you have to assemble them yourself. So, and I've heard some are more complicated than others. So how do you know that was even done right to the manufacturer's specs outside of, the instructions that came with them. You know what I mean? Like some people are better at putting stuff together than others.
Yeah, John, you care to weigh in on that, John?
I agree.
Well, and I think it kind of goes to like what you do, John, with the bows, as far as when you put them back together, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, when I put them back together, I go through a whole checklist. Every time I take a bow out of a press, I look at all the attachment points of the cables, on the little knobs on each wheel. I go through looking at it all because, anything can happen when you're working on something. If you just pull it out, give it a pull back without double checking, it could easily blow up in your face.
Yeah, we've had that happen a couple times, even with all the checks. So
yeah. I mean, things happen, man. Like I had a Aero blow up on me a couple years ago, just because I didn't. I hit an arrow with another arrow, but really didn't pay much attention to it. And essentially, the knock was cracked and exploded on me when I shot. Like you have to do your due diligence to look at your stuff. Bows are obviously there's a lot of energy binded into that product, so something could go. And obviously has went serious wrong for a lot of people. So same thing there. You have to inspect your weapons. I mean, inspection's key. I don't think that's talked about enough. That's like I said, that's why I was going to release that video. It's not just for our products; it's for all stuff, even not related, to help people. Because I mean, how many times you guys obviously follow some of these groups? You see people asking about like the rope starting to fray a little bit, if that's a safety issue. Like even the sheathing, you're like starting to see a little bit of wear. Like what is safe and what is not safe. And I've seen some keyboard engineers make some false accusations on that too, so it is pretty easy to understand what is safe and what is not safe. So I think it'd be important for us to put something out there to help people.
And especially given your background, both in the rock climbing and the safety world, I mean, if you want to talk about ropes and any of that, I mean, there's a pedigree there where you can follow and say, okay, like this is why I know this. Not I saw a YouTube video on it and I'm going to tell you what I learned from that.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, man, and what's funny to me is like, I think some people don't think it's that serious at 20 foot as it is at 1,000 feet. You know what I mean? Like it's all the same. Like people die all the time, even in rock climbing, from 20-foot falls. So like inspecting your gear is important. Like people put a lot more attention into inspecting like rock climbing stuff because they're like, well, I'm about to go up 1,000 feet, so I need to go through my rope every time. But like, anytime we go on a climbing trip, we pull our gear out of the car, we go through the rope. As we're, uncoiling the rope, we always go through it, make sure there's no nicks or anything in it where you're seeing the core. We call it a core shot rope. When you start to see the core through the sheath, that's when it can be dangerous. Same thing works with a lot of these ropes that people are using for their tethers and lineman's belts. That same type of inspection would translate there as well. And obviously with webbing or anything, it's just seeing if there's a big nick in it or something like that.
Which, and thinking about it, you say it like that, it would be super simple to check a 8-foot rope for your tether every time, and just for peace of mind. Where like you guys are checking a rope for climbing rocks. I mean, how long are your big ropes like that? I mean, how long does it take to do that?
Usually 200 feet
right.
is what most of. I mean, you can use longer ones, but usually like 200 feet's a longer rope, or 50 meters is a common one as well.
Right. So just
it doesn't take much time because we always have to uncoil anyway, because you wouldn't want a knot in your rope when you start climbing up, and your rope's having to run through pieces of gear, which are attached through carabiners. A knot wouldn't pull through it, so you can get into a really bad situation if you were to find out you have a knot in your rope, and you're 200 feet off the deck, or 100 feet halfway through the pitch.
Well, I mean, I just put an interesting correlation here. He said, so many people die from 20-foot falls, and you only hunt 10 to 12 feet. And he said you don't do all the safety stuff all the time. Is that why? You say, well, I'll be fine. It's only 10 feet.
No, I mean, I need to do a better job of using a lineman's belt, man. Like, I just, we all have to do a risk analysis when we do anything. And that's one thing I am going to get better at, is using a lineman's belt. But besides that, I'm always attached, especially when I get into the tree. Although I did hunt a tree last year. I was hunting this buck in the swamp in South Carolina, and the only tree I could find was this burnt, dead pine tree. And so I just put my stand up about 6 foot, and I didn't wear anything. So I was like, well, if it falls, I want to be able to just jump out.
Right.
So.
Be attached to it.
I'd much rather be able to jump out than be attached to it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I think we've all been there when on those really windy days and you're in a kind of suspect tree and you're thinking, man, if this falls and I'm stuck to it, like, it's awful.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I totally get that.
Oh, dude. Yeah. Especially with climbers, man. Climbers. I had more close calls with climbers than I have with anything.
I think me and climbers, I've had to climb down a bunch of trees with just the top section of my climber a lot of times. So more times than I'd like to admit. So
yeah, yeah. Especially the days before, like when I was coming up, nobody wore safety harnesses, and my best friend broke his shoulder on a climbing stand. A knot broke that he was on, and the whole climbing stand slid to the bottom of the tree and kind of kicked him off the back, and he was still attached with his feet into the platform and swung him down, and he landed on his shoulder and snapped his shoulder. We were like, I don't know, 12 or something like that.
To be young again.
Yeah.
Today,
yeah, that was scary.
Paralyzed.
Yeah, man. I mean, things can happen. This WMA a guy that's a manager of this WMA that I hunt down in South Carolina, he had to be airlifted last year because he fell out of his stand when he was climbing up. He wasn't wearing any type of harness or anything, and fell backwards, broke his back.
Yeah, we were hunting last year, and we kept hearing this chopper circling around, and there was a kid like maybe 3 miles away from us or so that fell out of a tree and didn't have any cell phone service, and ended up having just barely got a text out, and they had to come out and find him. It was pretty, I don't know, eye-opening, humbling.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's not much talked about the accident. So in rock climbing, American Alpine Club, which also creates American Alpine Journal, they put out a book every year that investigates and talks about every recorded climbing accident. And the reason they do that is to help educate people. And oddly enough, the number one cause of deaths and major injuries in rock climbing is people rappelling off the ends of the ropes, which is a common practice when you're rappelling, is always to have knots in your ropes. And, it would be pretty cool if there was something like that put out, and there may be, and I'm just unaware of it, but for the hunting industry, because there's a lot of accidents that happen every year. Because, one thing, especially with people saddle hunting, I read a thing today, people were concerned about the potential failure of a ropeman or any type of ascending device. So they back it up with a press stick or things like that, which, in rappelling, sometimes we back up our rappel device with a press stick in the event that our hand comes off. Sometimes you have to do these swinging rappels and stuff like that, where you can come in contact with a wall and could knock your hand loose or something. So a press stick will back it up. Some guys are doing that just to, be redundant in their system, which isn't a bad thing,
Right. Yeah. I guess, where do they get that information, or how is it reported? I mean, when I think about hunting, is there
I don't know, like a database or like some sort of mandate that it has to, like they are able to search through the hospital records, or is it voluntary? I mean, I guess I'm just thinking of how it's reported.
Well, I mean, like most accidents where somebody really gets potentially serious injured, there's going to be some type of, EMT or, fire department or something that comes in. Same thing with rock climbing. Most of the time when somebody gets seriously injured rock climbing, they have to bring out some type of search and rescue team. So I do know that, I can't remember if it's TMA has, or I believe it's TMA does have people that do investigation on incidents that they hear about. That way they can better, improve some of the standards and things that they're doing. But yeah, I mean, to your point, there's stuff that just doesn't make it to them. I'm assuming.
Yeah, I mean that would be good, but I guess in the hunting industry, so many people hunt out of such bullshit stuff. Like, I mean, I could think of all sorts of old wooden stands that people hunt out of, and they don't use a safety harness because it's a big giant platform. They don't inspect their cables. Every year there's somebody that says, I'm so glad I was wearing my safety harness because the cables broke on my tree stand that's been out in my property for 7 years, and I never looked at it. And
the squirrel chewed through the ratchet strap holding my whole tree stand up.
Yeah, I mean, that inspection portion, I mean, it seems like it would ultimately lead back to that.
Well, yeah, it comes back to the user, and that's why you see with a lot of manufacturers that they really go above and beyond with their verbiage and their warning labels, which, that's one thing that labs, when you have your products tested TMA, they go through your warning labels and stuff like that to make sure, you're covered there, because there's certain things you're not supposed to do. I mean, like with climbing sticks, it's not preferred to jump up and down on your sticks. Pretty much every manufacturer that makes climbing sticks has that in their warning verbiage. And to your point, like how many, if you've ever hunted a private lease or you were in public that you're able to leave stands in, how many like lock-on stands, for instance, have you seen that have been strapped to the tree and the tree's grown around the strap? I've seen that numerous times.
Oh, yeah.
Or old wooden ladder stands and stuff that boards are falling off and rotten. It's, at the end of the day, the user has to take responsibility as well,
Yeah, and I mean
some common sense is involved too.
Yeah, but I mean, like, so let's say that's the higher end Millennium stand that's left out there, or the Menards, Walmart, big game. If you leave them out there for 5 years, the
strap's going to be UV rotted.
Yeah,
or squirrel chewed. It's going to be screwed.
So it doesn't matter that one stand costs $50 and the other one costs $300. You still didn't take care of it, and it,
right.
You don't change the oil on your Ferrari, same as your Honda Civic. There's bound to be issues.
Oh, I know, man. Like, you definitely do. And that's the thing, is like, we as manufacturers, we can only guarantee the safety of the product. We cannot guarantee your safety because we don't know everybody's ability, and like if they do have a proper inspection protocol, what they're, with climbing sticks, for instance, like how comfortable are you climbing? Some people, I see it all the time in some of these groups, people talking about they're scared of heights, but they love hunting and they want to do it, so they're trying to conquer that fear. I know firsthand what vertigo and, when those little demons start talking in your head, like what it can do, it can cause people to completely freak out and fall. So like, we can't guarantee like what somebody's ability is. We can only guarantee the safety of the actual and durability of the product, so it's a slippery slope, man. Because I mean, especially if you have crappy hardware, those bolts are going to rust and snap over a few years, and UV starts breaking down poly, which is what's used in most, all webbing essentially. UV light starts breaking that down over time. So yeah, you can't leave this stuff out for long periods. I mean, squirrels can chew on ropes and things like that, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it's not to say that we don't do it, but it's.
Oh yeah. Oh man, like how many people, you know, growing up that hunted like some type of private land, you always hear about that old stand that they've hunted for 20 years, you know, and I've hunted on some people's private land, and you get in those things and you're just sitting there sweating the whole time, especially in the days before using climbing harness, you know, like a harness of any type. And I talk about this, like one time when I was younger, I met this old guy that was a bow hunter, and he taught me a method that he used, and I was using it where you use climbing spikes to climb a tree, and took a piece of plywood that was notched out, and you just pushed it down into the wedge, you know, of a forked tree, and you just stood there all day, you know, with no harness or anything. Like we've definitely come a long way. So.
Well, you talk about that balance aspect. John, the first time he hunted out of a saddle, he hunted out of it for like 1 hunt, 2 hunts, and then got in a tree stand and almost fell, like just from having the climbing harness on.
Well, yeah, because I mean, you're talking about like, you know, the fall restraint or being, you know, in or restrained in the tree, or, you know, whatever the terminology is. I went from the saddle where you're always hooked in. There's no possible way you're going to fall out, and you're like just hooked to the tree, and there's no issues of balance or anything. And then the next night we go back out, and Adam's filming. He's in the saddle, and I get back on my tree stand, and just in one hunt, you know, I had my harness on and stuff, but then I just would like lean out and look around, and all of a sudden I would just catch myself like almost falling out of the tree because of like I wasn't hooked in static to it.
Oh yeah, or people get in a rush. And I heard a guy talking on a podcast the other day that had a really close encounter last year with his saddle. Is when he went to clip into his bridge, he clipped in. You know, it was dark, and he'd been up there swinging around in it before daylight. And when it got daylight, he looked at it, and the bridge he was using was like a webbing bridge, and the carabiner never clipped all the way around, and it even was a screw lock carabiner, I believe, and he didn't screw it down, and it essentially was only halfway. It was hung halfway in the webbing. Does that make sense? Like the hook was just kind of there, and it was essentially open. And he said he'd been swinging around on it. I mean, things happen like that all the time. We get in this zone and fail to check the system, and that's where I do feel like, you know, from a static position, I don't think screw lock carabiners are always completely necessary. You can use a wire gate beaner because it is a static. There's not much movement going up and down for it to really come unclipped. But if you get into the process of always using a screw type carabiner, it will imprint in your brain most of the time that, hey, I have to screw this down. So you always make sure it's clipped, you know. So, I mean, having a good system and not getting in a rush is definitely most important.
Yeah, that I had a close encounter last year with the saddle as well. I was using my lineman's belt, and instead of using the carabiner, I'd like to get rid of one of the carabiners and do a girth hitch through the loop.
Yeah.
Well, it was like one of the first few times I had the saddle, and I didn't have like 2 setups with my lineman and my tether. And so I like got out there and I hooked in with my lineman's, and luckily I had a knot tied on the end. And when I slipped it through, I missed the loop, like in the dark.
Yep.
And luckily, like the knot like caught in the back side of the loop. And here I'm up. I didn't realize it until it was daylight. You know, I'm up there hooking in. I'm putting my stuff up, or my stand on. And actually, it wasn't even. It was my harness, is what it was.
Yeah.
I wasn't even in the saddle.
In the saddle.
I still had my hang-on tree stand. That's what it was. I got up there, and I had my lineman on, but it was not hooked in right. And I'm like, holy crap, I'm up, 18 feet and there's stumps and debris down below my tree. If I would have fallen, I would have, probably got impaled, or at least, probably would have broke my neck. But
Yeah, that's an accident like that is, and for me, when you hear me talk about saying I don't use a lineman's belt sometimes, it's like because I feel more comfortable with if I have at least 3 points of contact, I feel pretty confident that even if my stick kicked out, I'm not really going anywhere. Whereas when you lean all the way back into a lineman's belt, if your system is not completely secure and like you didn't tie that or didn't connect a carabiner correctly, or your ropeman, if some people use a ropeman on their linemen's, you put all your weight back there, and most of the time, you're taking your hands off the tree because you trust that system. If that goes, man, you're about to be in some falling backwards. Like that is a very dangerous way to fall.
Yeah.
I'd much rather fall straight down than I would on my back.
Right.
Yeah, no kidding.
I mean, I've done that before. Honestly, like in training for rock climbing, we climb at climbing gyms, and some of them have what they call an auto belay, where it's a belay device that's on. It's kind of like as you go up, it's kind of like a seat belt. So you pull it out. It's usually attached to the top of the climbing route, and they usually have them tied off at the bottom to where when you want to clip it to yourself, you undo it from the bottom and you attach it to your climbing harness, and you climb up the route. And when you fall, it catches like a seat belt and slowly lowers you back to the ground. Well, I was in a zone one day on a wall outside that's like 40 foot. And I was just running through a training routine. It was just completely focused. And I start climbing, and I get up about 25 feet and realize I'd never clipped myself into I never clipped into that auto belay. And so I start to panic a little bit, and I just had to control myself and start down climbing. And I had to go through this really hard section where I kind of had, on this climbing route, I climbed out over this roof, like where you're kind of upside down for a little bit. So I had to like down climb through that stuff. And ultimately I got real pumped out, and I had to essentially take a 12-foot fall. But I evaluated the situation. It was like, I'd much rather like jump down 12 feet than risk going through this section pumped out and falling backwards on my back or head. You know what I mean?
Right.
But I was just in that zone. The way we get, especially if you're running late hunting, like you don't take that extra time to check your system, and accidents happen. I mean, I've had a few friends die rock climbing because they didn't check their system properly. They did something wrong, like it happens, and it happens to great people, because we get caught up in other things and don't run through our process.
So you mentioned that your birthday's today, that you're 40. You were telling me the other day you got a pretty big trip coming up for your 40th birthday here. Probably when this airs, you'll be headed out. So you want to tell us a little bit about the hunt you got coming up here in the next week or so?
Yeah, man. I'm heading out to Alaska on August the 5th, and today's July 26th. So got essentially, was it not this Wednesday, but next Wednesday I'll be heading out. My buddy from Colorado, we grew up together, and he moved to Colorado while he was in the military. And when he got out of the military, he stayed out there, and that's who I do a lot of my Western trips. It's usually just he and I. And he turned 40 this year too, and we're going and doing a fly-in trip into the North Brooks Range for 10 days to chase caribou. Pretty exciting, man. It's like Alaska's been a dream of mine since I was a kid. Like, and I've said this on a few podcasts. Like, when I grow up, I want to be a sheep hunter, essentially a sheep guide. Like, I'd like to scale back my life here in the next 5 to 10 years and start becoming a guide or something up there, because I love getting in the big mountains, man. And so this trip will hopefully confirm if the passion is there after I get into that type of environment. But yeah, it should be a really good time, man. Caribou hasn't been the top of my list, but it's kind of like where you should cut your teeth in Alaska adventures with the caribou from research I've done.
And what are you taking out there for hunting equipment?
Like a weapon or just overall gear?
Yeah.
I'm taking my longbow, because some of the areas, and you really don't know where you'll get dropped off until you get there, because the charter services, have since they fly in and out, they have a decent idea, daily of where the herd is, and they want to put you in the areas with the best, where the migration's coming through. So some of that terrain is stalkable for a bow, and especially like we're getting dropped off in a float with a float plane. And my understanding from reading is areas that have those types of rivers or lakes offer some terrain variants where it can be stalkable for a bow. But I'm not going so diehard that, like, if I don't get it with the bow, I'm not going to kill anything. Like if I see a good animal, at 300 yards, I'm curious. I've got my boomstick with me too, so I'm not going to put all my hats on to being a diehard bow hunter. But it would be really cool. I definitely would take a lesser caliber animal with my bow before a larger one with a gun. If the opportunity presented itself.
That's sweet.
Yeah, we talked to a Michigan guy here, Jim Eckhout. He's been out to Alaska.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how many times. Like it was like once or twice a year for the last 30 years or something like that. I mean,
that's
it was
awesome.
just insane. But I know I heard you talk about it on another podcast about the simplicity of traditional equipment. He's a traditional hunter, but he went on this muskox hunt, and I don't think he told it on the podcast. We're gonna have to get him back on to tell it. But he got all the way there, and after he went through TSA and everything, he had his muzzleloader with him because it was muzzleloader season. But he's a diehard traditional hunter, and got out there with no bowstring for his recurve, so he ended up shooting a muskox with a muzzleloader. But that it can be as simple as less moving parts, less to break, just need extra string. But if you don't have any string, it still presents challenges.
Oh man, yeah, that would suck, man. I heard on a podcast, I can't remember who it was. It was a traditional bow hunter, but I think it was when they went through Canada or somewhere. The TSA took his arrows. His arrows were missing, and he's pretty sure they took his arrows. So he got to camp without any arrows. That would be horrible, but my buddy's bringing a gun, so if something like that happened, at least one of us hopefully will have a gun. That's the biggest fear with most of my Western trips. I drive, but with this trip, I've got like 3 connections, and we all know how airlines can lose your luggage, and that's been like my biggest fear of this whole trip is like some of my gear getting lost, because we're kind of on a time crunch. We get there on the 5th, and we pick up a rental truck, and we drive, I think it's 372 miles up the haul road to catch a float plane. So yeah, man, hope all that's good. But regardless, man, I'm looking forward to it. And honestly, with everything that's going on in the world today, I really kind of need to unplug from media for a little bit. So that's going to be like, honestly, the biggest attribute of this whole hunt is just being able to unplug for a couple weeks.
Sounds good. So what is your what archery equipment are you using right now? I mean, what is your bow?
What's that?
What's your bow setup and equipment?
So man, I have 5 different traditional bows that I circulate through, but on this trip I have a Tolkien 2-piece whip, and it's a 50 at 28, and so it's with my draw link, I believe it's like right at 54 pounds, and I'm using this year I'm shooting day 6 350 arrows, and actually they're broadheads on this trip with wild fletching feathers, and which that's a really cool feather company. I don't know if y'all have heard of them, but they take they grind turkey feathers like from wild turkeys, and so a wild turkey has more natural oil on their feathers than domestic turkey feathers, which most feathers that you buy from the store are domestic turkeys. So the ones with the oil withstand the weather a little bit, rain a little bit better and moisture. But I am going to fletch up a few arrows with 4 fletched trad vanes. I started using those last year, and they worked out pretty well. They're a little delicate, but no more than I need them. I prefer shooting the feather personally, but.
So what's your final arrow weight on that setup like that?
With that final arrow weight, it's like, I believe it was like right at 580, so it's a little over 10 grains per inch. I do have another bow set up where I shoot tough head broadheads, and that arrow comes in. It's about the same pound bow, and that arrow is right at, like, I think 650. Which, man, it makes my bow so quiet, but I wanted to be a little bit closer to that 10 grains per inch. Just with a caribou, I'm willing to take a little bit longer shot than I would like say a whitetail or black bear or something.
Right.
Yeah, so we've got a couple traditional bows, and I absolutely love shooting them. I got to get some arrows built with feathers. Everything I've got is just vanes, and they're just my old ragtag arrows. But there's just something about shooting instinctual that I just think is so fun. Like, it's more of I know that it's like referred to as like the struggle stick or whatever, but I don't get as frustrated with it because I feel like there's that margin of error, because there is no sights, there's no everything, it's just refining that process, where with the compound, it's like, I know the process, like what's supposed to happen, and when it doesn't go wrong, I know that it's just me that screwed it up, and I don't know. It's just a more enjoyable experience. I'm actually working with a guy that's one of our listeners. I'm going to buy one of his bows because he's got a custom bow being built, but it's one of the Stalker Coyotes with
cool
longbow limbs on it. So I'm pretty excited about getting my hands on that.
Man, yeah, it's really fun. I really enjoy shooting a traditional bow. It's very mental. Like, if my mind's not clear, like, I usually don't shoot as good. Like, I have to really like step and clear my mind to have good groups. Like, it's like with a compound. I'm not saying compound shooting is easy, don't get me wrong, but like, you have so many things engineered into there to help you with your anchor point, like as far as draw stops and things like that, to where, as long as you're somewhat steady and you're not just letting it rip, like, you can shoot a pretty good group, especially, 30 yards or under. And that's what I ran into, is I wasn't having fun shooting a compound anymore unless I was like shooting out 70 plus yards, where I was really having to focus and make it very mental, because there was very small margin of error. Whereas with that traditional bow, man, like, you have to repeat that anchor point and everything and shot sequence every time if you want to be somewhat consistent. And it takes a lot of work, man. I have a lot of fun, and when it goes where you want it to, it is a good feeling. And then also, like, I think you were kind of saying, since you don't have sights or anything, if you do make a mistake and miss something, people don't give you as much crap about it either.
That's what I'm looking for, is the built-in excuse.
Yeah, the built-in excuse. Yeah, yeah. If you have a $2,000 setup compound bow that's shooting lasers, like, and you miss, you're like, how did you even do that? But that's the cool thing, man, about hunting animals, man, is you get so worked up, you can miss one. You miss a barn with a rifle. I think we've all done it.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. I don't. We talked about your products and stuff, and this kind of almost turned into more of a safety podcast than a Timber Ninja podcast. Is there anything else you want to talk about, like with your products, or like any closing statements?
I mean, man, we have some other products coming out. We have, it's not private. We have a camera arm that's getting close to being released, and a tree stand that we're working try to have done before the start of season. We've been, like everybody else, been hindered a little bit with some of this COVID stuff. It's I was talking to a guy today about it, and I was like, well, ideally our goal is September for our tree stand, but I'm saying October just because we don't know. I mean, it's not necessarily a materials issue all the time. It's also becoming a labor issue. There's a lot of people a lot of manufacturers that are having a hard time, and in all businesses, not just manufacturers, of getting employees because some people are making more money staying at home. So it's a crazy time, but yeah, I mean, we did turn this into a safety thing, and like, I hope my comments don't come across like we're trying to beat up anybody else, but I think people do need to be aware and ask some questions about how their products are being tested, because there's not a basis of getting into the industry to start selling safe products. Just because somebody puts 300 pounds rated it doesn't mean it's really went through the ringer. But we have some other really exciting news about to hit pretty soon that I think people are going to be really into, and falls in line with our conservation initiative. So yeah, man, we're going to keep trying to make cool products. We've got other stuff on the board for next year. So I think it's going to be pretty exciting, man. And we've had a really good run so far. A lot of supportive people, and we really appreciate, everybody, giving us a look, and it's fun, man. And I'm just ready to start hunting. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah. I mean, like we were talking, I'm headed to Colorado with my father-in-law and his buddy, and meeting one of our friends out there, and then John's on his way to Montana. So
nice.
it's coming quick. Like,
yeah, real quick.
I mean, maybe not August 5th in Alaska quick, but it's still coming.
Oh, dude,
yeah.
I'm kind of heartbroken that I'm missing elk season this year. I just love elk hunting, man. I think because I grew up doing I was a duck guide, and I've always turkey hunted. I love calling animals, and it's just something about having an 800-pound animal come into your call screaming at you just gets me worked up, man. And especially when they're just screaming at night and you can't sleep. Like, when you really get in there and they're turned up, God, it's hard to beat that,
Well, that's what we're looking forward to. I mean, we went 2 years ago basically on our own and got into some elk, but we didn't get into that level of action. And, so good, bad, or indifferent, we got the taste for elk hunting, and now it's that thing that you're like, man, I just want to get out there. Like last year, not going and having to, watch social media and watch everybody's, what's going on with elk and the calling and everything's just, I totally feel for you. But I'd imagine that, this caribou trip is if you want to be a sheep guide, is a step in the right direction to meet the right people and, get your roots buried.
Yeah. Well, it's just the one thing I really love about all these hunts like that is just being able to get back in there and be away from people and living amongst your own means, for multiple days. Like all of my Western trips, we're back there 5 to 10 days living off our backs, and we just don't get a chance to unplug and be in the wild. And so for me, that part of the whole experience is really the catalyst. Like killing animals, just the icing on the cake for it. And then now, like with going this Alaska thing, what I'm really stoked on is just being out there and having, knowing you have to be prepared because you're getting dropped off and you're hundreds of miles from anything. And if weather gets crappy, they're not gonna be able to come get you, so you got to have your T's crossed and your I's dotted, and I get worked up about that kind of stuff. And yeah, we'll see, man. Hopefully we don't have any grizzly encounters, but I'm not really that concerned about them because, in the area we're going to be in, they get hunted. And usually, from my understanding, is areas where they get hunted, they don't really care about being around people. But Montana where they don't get hunted. That's where grizzlies can be a booger.
Yeah.
So where can people follow along with everything that you're doing and check out your stuff if they are so inclined?
So we're on Instagram at Timber Ninja Outdoors. We're on Facebook at Timber Ninja Outdoors, YouTube, same. And then our website's timberninjaoutdoors.com. And, we're producing more YouTube stuff too, just not really always related to our products, but kind of gear education stuff. We've got some reviews on there, not reviews necessarily, but just essential stuff that some people may not know about. Like I did a whitetail pack dump for mid-season. I did a boot review. We're going to do a few more. We're going to do one before I leave for Alaska, and then my partner Jordan, who's involved in the business, he's going to Idaho elk hunting. We're going to do a kind of a pack dump for people, because the stuff's pretty helpful. I mean, if you've never been backpack hunting, for instance, it can be kind of overwhelming. So just more information. I mean, we could all benefit from good information, and I love sharing stuff that I may know. I mean, there's a lot of people that know more than me, but I know a decent amount.
Yeah, it kind of goes, some people out west take it for granted, but like that was one of the things when we were getting ready to go out there was like, dude, we made lists, like what all do we need? We're starting from scratch. Our Eastern Flatlanders going out there and we're in the woods for 8 days, living on our backs, out of our backpacks. And it was a little bit intimidating at first, but when people like you, or we ended up, we did a couple podcasts and talked about all that. That's good information.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you one that I'm going to do that I think is, in my opinion, is something I continue to improve as well, is nutrition for the backcountry, man. Like how to pack up to have enough food or not too much food, because, if you're on an 8-day hunt, food is essentially over 30% of your weight. I mean, you're looking at 2 pounds per day is where I'm at right now. It's about 2 pounds a day for food. And, just knowing how to get the right amount of calories to get you through a long hunt, because, if you get dehydrated a little bit, it's so hard to recover from that. And it also, like, if you bonk, run out of calories, that's hard to recover from. So there's a science in that to make sure you're dialed. And, coming up doing endurance sports, running and cycling, like I have a decent understanding of that, and I've been able to put that into my system. So I am going to do a video and write a blog about some of that too, because, that's something I still play with to make sure it's right. I don't know about you, but every time I go out, even a day, and thinking I have my calories dialed, I still lose about 10 pounds when I go out for like an 8-day hunt.
Yeah, I didn't weigh myself. I don't know if John did when we came back, but I mean, we did over 100 miles in 8 days, so
yeah,
we were getting it.
Yeah, I always just say that I probably lost that weight just because I'm not drinking any beer or anything. It's all water weight. Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, I think that's all we got for today, man. Just like I said, it's just a lot of good information, and I like where it's coming from, with all of your background and everything is like, it's not a hard sell. It's not, this is what, you built something that you wanted for yourself, and then it's just kind of transitioned into, people telling you that, they'd like that too. So.
Yeah, it's been fun, man. We look forward to it, and, it's been great getting to meet some of the people that are following along, and yeah, it's awesome, man. And I really appreciate you guys having this come on, man. Love to do it again. Hopefully we meet up in person someday. I know you met Adrian, so I apologize for that. But
yeah,
I'm sure we'll bump in. I think we'll probably go to ATA this year. We keep having people asking us if we're going to go, and I think we'll go at least this year, or not this year, 2021.
Right.
Yeah.
We'll look forward to getting some of that weight back up with a couple beers here and there then.
Yeah, roger that, man. man, I hope you guys have fun, and definitely keep me in the loop about how your trips out west go. I love hearing those types of stories.
Yeah, we'll definitely be in touch. So have fun in Alaska, and
Good luck. Stay safe.
as soon as you get that guide service, so we're going to have the podcast discount. So
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've been trying to scheme on that, man. I actually, I'm trying to continue to network in those areas. I want to get that going sooner than later. I'd love to be spending months to 45 days a year out in the big mountains. That'd be awesome.
Cool.
all right,
Cool.
we'll talk to you in a bit.
All right, y'all have a good week.
Yeah,
Talk to you later.
Romantic, isn't it? Shut up and sit down.